So this is us, what we're doing. We are here together for the next 2 hours. A little bit about the organisation that Rebecca and myself work for. We're based in Birmingham in the UK, working across the UK and some international work. And really our founding principle is that so much of what is done in the name of anti-racism, in the name of other equalities, is really just superficial, tinkering around the edges, not really addressing how power is operating, not really addressing root causes. And we are committed to approaching these issues in a more kind of honest and fundamental way. What we're up to today is to have a bit of discussion around racism and anti-racism, have some kind of foundational understanding there, but more particularly for you to lean into and explore together what might be the advantages of working in affinity spaces. And just to be clear what we mean by affinity groups, that is where, for the purposes of exploring anti-racism, for the purposes of pursuing anti-racism, we spend some time separated by racialized identity, so that people of colour, black and brown people, global majority individuals, however you like to identify, are in one group together. And then white and white presenting people are in a separate group. That's what we mean by racialized identity affinity groups. What we've got today is kind of 4 parts, a little bit of theory and foundational discussion. Then we're going to give you some experience of getting into affinity groups yourselves and having discussion in affinity space. And then we'll come back together and share. And then we've got some important information to convey in our last 10 minutes or so around how to register if you're interested to do that, and how that registration process will run. Gigi, is there anything I've forgotten there, or anything else important to say?
Not really. I would say that stick around until the end so that you also get the chance to understand how you can register. But I think this captures it all, so go ahead.
Thanks. Okay. So just some requests, invitations, suggestions for how we work together. Let me look at this. We in BRAP very intentionally and deliberately talk about inviting people to create together a brave space. We choose not to use the language of safe space. And the reason for that is the history of racial justice work, anti-racism work. Too often, white people have complained of feeling unsafe, or have misunderstood feelings of discomfort for feelings of lack of safety, and have thereby used their power to say, we're not going to stay in this conversation, or I'm not prepared to be honest, or I'm not prepared to take feedback. So recognizing the way that whiteness has historically and currently used the language of safety to protect itself from interrogation and challenge, we instead invite you to come together into a brave space. Recognizing that for all of us as racialized beings, having these conversations can be quite uncomfortable. And for many of us, it might resonate with very painful experiences of having been racialized and having experienced racism. Those responses live in your body. So please pay attention to how your body feels, what it needs. Give yourself a stretch, make sure you're taking in enough air, make sure you're hydrated. Our bodies are really crucial to this work. So really, please pay attention to yours and give your body what it needs. It is really supportive of having honest conversations if we can see one another online. So our request is that wherever it's technically possible, please keep your camera on. Recognizing you might choose in short periods to turn your camera off just to enable yourself to self-regulate. But we really are grateful for, and we know the conversation benefits from being able to see one another. So our request is that if it's possible for you to keep your camera on throughout. if and when any feelings get activated in you, please use that as an invitation to get curious about what is going on. What was it that you experienced, or you said, or somebody else said, that caused your body, your emotions to become dysregulated in some way? And giving that compassion and curiosity can be very supportive of your own learning and growth. Feeling activated in this space is not necessarily a sign that you've done anything wrong or we've done anything wrong. It's not necessarily a sign there's a problem. It just means you are a human being having a human emotional and somatic response to truths about the world that are deeply troubling and very upsetting. So give yourself some compassion and approach with curiosity anything that activates you. Alongside that, it's important, and particularly for white people in this space, particularly for white people who we can often be quite clumsy, maybe a bit oblivious, maybe a bit unaware of our impact and our privilege. Yes, it matters what your intention is, but it also matters deeply what our impact is. So as you bring yourself to the discussion, we invite you to be holding both of those together, and not to think that having good intentions is an excuse for having a harmful impact. We need to pay attention to both. Please take care of yourself during the session, and also think about what you're going to do at the end at 12 o'clock. It's really helpful to give yourself time and space to decompress, ideally to get outside, have some fresh air, maybe take a walk. But I really hope that you haven't got like back-to-back meetings stacked up and you're going to leave here and go straight into something else demanding. Please give yourself some compassion and some time to reflect, to decompress after we've done that today. That list is our requests of you, but I did want to give an opportunity for any of you to make requests of us or one another for ground rules that will help you to learn and to be able to be fully present in this space today. I'm just going to check the chat. Yeah. I can't see everybody's face. Maybe I'll just take the slides down for a moment. Is there anything needing to be added or needing to be asked around our ground rules, how we work together? Okay, thank you. I'm going to push on in the interests of time. Thank you, Laura. Okay, so ground rules, share. Okay, so we'd like to, we are beginning by some foundational theory around racism, anti-racism, and a little bit of exploration about why anti-racism is so important to the field of international cooperation. So a little bit of history, which I'm sure will be familiar to many of you. The categories, the racialized categories that we are familiar with today are a relatively recent invention in human history. They were created about 500-600 years ago for the very specific purpose of justifying the transatlantic trafficking in enslaved Africans, the project of European imperialism, the project of European colonialism. So it's not the case that there were these neutral categories that just existed and then were picked up and misused. Those categories were created for the purpose of justifying European colonialism, trafficking in enslaved Africans, and imperialism. So the categories of race were created to kind of establish, if you like, this false hierarchy. So that diagram on the right-hand side is taken from Montesquieu. So many of the so-called Enlightenment philosophers had similar ways of categorizing human beings. And it is no accident that every single one of those hierarchies had white at the top and black at the bottom. So racial categories have never been neutral. By definition, they have white supremacy and anti-blackness baked into them from the start. And racism has been perpetuated and reproduced through systems of meaning making, knowledge creation, through stories, through culture, through narratives, through myths, and through practice, and through the generational accumulation and passing down of assets and resources, territory, people, natural resources, wealth that has been stolen and expropriated and continues to live out global level, but also within different nationalities, racialized disparities in income and in wealth. Okay, so the hierarchy that was invented for the purposes of justifying colonialism still exists today, and I'm sure that's not news to any of you here on this call. So given that that is what racism is about, given that the racism is about power and wealth and meaning making, anti-racism has to be opposed to all of that. So fundamentally, anti-racism recognizes that race is a category that is a fantasy, it's made up. Race has no basis in biology, race has no basis in science. It is socially constructed for the purposes of reproducing white supremacy and anti-blackness. And as an anti-racist, I need to understand how that thinking has been internalized into all of us. Whether I'm sitting at the top of that false racial hierarchy or at the bottom or anywhere in between, we have all been socialized, we have all been conditioned into thinking that this hierarchy is somehow natural or normal. And in some contexts, we won't even notice it anymore because it just seems that's how the world is. So whatever our racialized identity, we have all internalized some of this, and we all have work to do in order to recognize the ways that we've internalized that and to be able to challenge and eradicate those ideas from ourselves and others. And that's one of the reasons that we choose to work in affinity space, because the work that white people have to do to eradicate that thinking from ourselves is just as important, but it's different than the work that global majority people have to do to recognize and eradicate that thinking. Okay. Anti-racism then is recognizing race as a social construct and challenging that idea. It is understanding how the process of racialization has created belief systems that consistently favor white people and marginalize people of color, marginalize global majority people. And as anti-racists, we recognize that racism is systemic. It's not just about an individual person doing a bad thing to another person. It's about how these belief systems are entrenched and embedded across society and how structural inequality is reproduced. As anti-racists, we need to be really adept at naming how power is operating, notice how power is operating, using the power that we all have in very intentional ways to disrupt the status quo. And anti-racism intentionally invites white people into the conversation, recognizing that it's the people who currently sit unfairly at the top of the pyramid who need to do most to change in order to undo the oppressive systems that operate there. And there's a quotation that I love in that context. I don't know whether Dwayne Reed was the inventor of this, but he's certainly one who has amplified it. One of the consistent founding beliefs that we have at BRAP, the approach that we take, is that white supremacy is the work of white people to undo. White supremacy won't die until white people see it as a white issue we need to solve, rather than a black issue we need to empathize with. So that's one of the kind of contexts within which we do this work. Okay, so that is our kind of foundational theory piece. Now we wanted to get into a discussion with you about why do we think anti-racism is so important for international cooperation. Now, I've got a question here. I'm recognizing that for many of you, you may know each other, you may not know each other. It may be, it might feel intimidating to raise your voice in the room. But I'm just going to ask that question now and see who would like to share some thoughts, some beliefs, opinions about why anti-racism is so crucial for those of you who work in international cooperation. So I had 4 things that I put down into this slide. I'm obviously speaking from a UK perspective, and I'm very much aware of huge scandals in UK-based development organisations have had in the past few years. I'm thinking about Oxfam, I'm thinking about Save the Children, but I'm sure they're not unique. There is a very troubling pattern of abuses of power by individuals, by organisations in the development sector, in the international cooperation sector. And an anti-racist perspective, I think, is a vital part of being able to challenge and condemn and prevent those abuses of power. The second thing I was thinking of is, you've already mentioned this, it's a very necessary corrective to the global north bias that is present from the origins of international cooperation as a field, and is reproduced in very many ways. You know, the money comes, the power sits in the global north, and people in the global south are just meant to be grateful or meant to sort of go along with this in some sort of passive way. So an anti-racist perspective, I think, again, is a necessary corrective to those power dynamics and how those power dynamics are expressed through the way that knowledge is generated, through the way that research is done, through the way that performance indicators are tracked and managed. There is just a whole lot that can be reproducing and reinforcing that bias from the global north. I think it's also important, and I loved, I think, Sammy, it was you who gave us this, looking back to the historical context of how have we got to be where we are. I'm thinking of a recent video I saw about making the point that Africa was colonized not because it was poor, but because it was so rich. How many of the countries and communities who now exist in an impoverished state, that didn't happen by accident. It didn't happen because people are stupid or they don't work hard. It happened because people stole land and money and resources, and that extraction continues to this day. If we don't understand the historical roots of the problems that we're challenging today, then we're going to be not in any good position to address those in a meaningful and effective way. And then again, this has been spoken about in terms of the emotional impact, in terms of relationships. But if we are genuinely looking for partnership, for coalition, we need to recognize that anti-racism is a core part of that, because all of the systems that continue to marginalize and oppress individuals are intimately linked. Late stage capitalism is intimately linked with white supremacy. It's intimately linked with patriarchy and homophobia. We need to be able to see how those systems of oppression support and reinforce one another. And an anti-racist lens that is very aware of power and is deliberately using power to disrupt systems of oppression is a very powerful way of generating the understanding, the relationships, the approach that is needed to make a stand against those global systems. So I'm just going to pause here again and see if there's anything else that has occurred to you around the relevance of anti-racism in international cooperation work. Yeah. Come in. Ingrid, was that?
Yes, but I also see Gigi.
Yeah, I have one question. I'm not sure if you would be able to answer that, Julian or Rebecca, but since I noticed that from the group in which we participated, the global majority group, in which there were questions raised about the granularity of how we define an affinity within a group. You know, global majority still has many different identities. So to give answer to, or to give space to that, I would say request that came surface from this group. Maybe you can share a little bit on how this topic, this question on, you know, identities within global majority could be tackled in an affinity space that is organized in such a way.
Mm. So I'm going to give you an answer based on theory because I don't have the lived experience of being a facilitator in that space. But let me try and sort of unpack this. So first of all, recognizing the white supremacy that is inherent in saying, you know, we're going to give equal resources to a small group of white people and then everybody in the rest of the world just gets another half. So I can really see the potential tension in that. And I don't know how it is in your part of Europe. In our part of Europe, there has been a lot of conversation around what is the label that is attached to a global majority group. In the UK, we had this horrible term BAME, which has really gone out of use, gone out of fashion now. But there is something deeply problematic in finding one small label to encapsulate the lived experience of billions of people across the globe who are clearly so very different. And I would say the reason that we do it in a binary way of just white people, global majority, is that everybody in that global majority group, to a greater or lesser extent and in different contexts, has the experience of living with racism, experiencing racism in their daily life, having experienced racism in a communal way, in a historical way. And everybody in the white group has the experience of living with white privilege, in being a beneficiary of systemic racism. So although in both groups there's obviously many, many varieties and different contexts, there is one thing that everyone in that group has in common. Yeah, and we work from that place of commonality into, okay, so what's it like for me as a person of dual heritage to live and to challenge white supremacy? What is it for me as the children of African immigrants to challenge white supremacy? What is it for me as a third generation Black British person to challenge white supremacy? So there's something that everyone has in common, and then there are many different ways that each of us needs to use our own positionality in all the different intersections that we have. What is it for me as a white straight woman of 50 years old to challenge white supremacy? What is it for me as a Black queer teenager to challenge white supremacy? So I'm just loving the richness of the conversations that you're having and sharing. And I'm really appreciating how you're holding power in a kind of structural way, but also in the emotional impact of that, the need for healing, the need for recognizing harm, the need for avoiding further harm. So we've got 15 more minutes together. I'm going to shift us now into the final part of today's session, which is giving you information. There's quite a lot to share here, so take a deep breath. And Gigi, but maybe you might want to come in at any point to sort of pick up what we are sharing. So this is a crucial piece of information for you. We've got a flow chart that says starting next month and then going through to June, there will be those two different affinity groups meeting separately in parallel. And then in July, we're going to have two meetings where the whole community comes back together to share a cross-racialized identity, to talk about what are we going to do to put our anti-racism into practice. Okay, so these are the dates and times. The pricing is at three different levels. There are reduced and solidarity pricing options available, but on a strictly limited basis. So all of you who are able to pay, it's really important that you do pay, so to enable others to have reduced and solidarity options. Gigi, sorry, shall I keep going here, or do you want to pick up? I mean, we both know what the slides are. I don't know whether it's helpful for me to carry on, or you wanted to take over.
No, you can carry on. I'll drop in when I have something to share.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so these are the dates and times. That is the pricing. 2 slides now on what we need from you. So first of all, the criteria for joining these affinity spaces. First of all, you work for an organisation that is active in this area. So we're looking at organisations working in international collaboration or philanthropy, social justice or social impact. Second thing to say, we have got 24 places, so 12 spaces for global majority, 12 spaces for white. Places will be allocated on a first come, first served basis. So if you are interested, click on the registration link. It will be live straight after this webinar. Get your name down on the list. If we have got more demand than we can fit within those 24 places, priority is going to be given to Partos members and affiliates. And then if there are additional spaces available after that, others are also welcomed on a first come, first served basis. This is the registration link. Can one of my colleagues, you've possibly already done this, put the link in the chat so that that is available? Yeah, so that's how to get the link. And then finally, this is more on a personal level, but if you are applying to join one of those spaces, really what we kind of ask you to commit to is that you will be an active participant, that you will attend all of the sessions. The sessions become more fruitful the more that the group can develop trust, vulnerability, intimacy, and really get deep into the work. And for that trust to develop, we need people to be able to show up regularly, okay? We also need your commitment to the shared values as we've set them out today, that we are here to undermine white supremacy, to challenge racism, to challenge anti-Blackness. We take that as a given. We're not going to argue why that's the thing to do. And that we're committed collectively and individually to creating a brave space where we can learn together, where we pay attention to intention and impact. And we need your intrinsic motivation to contribute to anti-racism and to address both white privilege and white saviorism within your organisation. And then also, I think it was Ingrid who spoke about this earlier, we want you to be prepared to be the change. So recognising that for each of us, my own self is the most powerful tool I have. However my self is racialised, however I'm gendered, however my different intersectionalities combine, that you're ready to work on yourself, work with yourself as an instrument of change, including developing your own skills around emotional self-regulation and checking your impact against your intention. So that's what we want from you kind of as a learner to enter this space. And yeah, if you're interested to know more, you're very welcome to go to the website at Partos, to email Gigi or Elmar, and to use that registration link. I'm going to stop there. We've had a lot of people needing to go, so I guess they're all like managing their time and their bodies before the top of the hour. So as far as I'm concerned, really happy to leave it here. I've really appreciated working with you and your questions and your comments and your thoughts this morning.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Julian and Rebecca, and also everybody else for joining us today. It's been a very interesting and insightful session, and it's really appreciated that you also take your time to be present. So I think now take care of yourself as you move into the rest of the day. Indeed, pay attention to your bodies, regulate yourself with drinking, movement, whatever, shaking it off. And I hope to see you in the Affinity spaces. The details will be shared as well as the link with the recording of this session. I think for the people that attended, I might be able to send a direct link to like everything, but also all the information to register. So take care, And if there's anything, feel free to reach out to me by mail, and hope to see you soon. Yes?
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.